Hello and welcome to Power Reflections, a proud member of the Duff Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most Christmassy work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And we are coming at you live in the Discord. Pew pew, Discord.
That's
If
their
you want
sound.
That's their official sound. If you want to join us live for these live recordings, you can go to duffmedia.com/Discord and be in chat like all these fine folks who are sending gun emojis or pistol emojis in chat right now.
Yeah, and also correcting us when we say that graham crackers are salty.
Yeah, exactly. How would we know without the folks from Discord? But let's talk about Crossed with Silver 19.5, the first of the two chapters that we're here to talk about today. And this is from Avery's perspective. We get the conversation with Avery, Clem, and Samaniego, where Clem is kind of the person in the middle being convinced by Avery or Samaniego who is good and who is mean.
Yeah, this is such like a fun idea from a writing perspective, to put Clem in this conversation. Like, because it was said in the story that they did this so that he'd actually show up to the table and talk. Like, it's in there that he makes the deal with Clem to actually hear Avery out because he's so desperate to get Clem on board.
Yeah.
But like from a more outside the story perspective, like from a more meta perspective, it's great because like it also forces Samaniego to like play a very different role than he would with Avery. Like he hates practitioners. He wouldn't engage with her, but he's kind of being forced to justify and sell himself, which he wouldn't want to do to Avery. So it's so much fun because this is really the only way we could have ever seen him like this.
Yeah. But I think yeah, you're right. Like without Clem here, this conversation would be very different. I don't think Samaniego would open up at all. But I think it's very interesting and it really pays off in the sense of like getting Samaniego's perspective is so anti practitioners as you would expect, but also kind of like he makes some good points at parts, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He's going to be really fun to talk about because he reminds me a lot of the culprits in that he's got some good points. He's just like missed the forest for the trees with them.
Yeah. It's fun that Avery forces them to start with some like mundane chit chat too, just to dip a toe in the water, as she says.
I love how immediately it fails though. Like she's like, no, we can talk about normal stuff. Like, how was your drive in? And Clem's just immediately like, well, my truck is a serial killer, so you know how that is. And like Samaniego gets to be the one who calls out that it's like, wow, we lasted like what 10 seconds without talking about murder.
Yeah, it is very fun.
Yeah, I do think it's really interesting though, like how Samaniego comes at Avery so hard here right at the start though. Like once they get past the small talk, he tends to just like immediately kind of go at her with like, he tells Clem he wanted to get the measure of or whatever, but like it's pretty clear he just thinks she should have killed Anthem and America and like all these people. Like he just wants her to kill people. He wants her to like be the executioner. But also that would mean that she's the sort of person he can openly kill. Like it's just I mean, we'll get into the hypocrisy of Samaniego a lot this chapter, I think. But like, I just thought that it's funny how he comes in so hard trying to bait Avery into suggesting she does a murder.
Yeah. I mean, like he's always trying to just see, like, he's trying to push Avery into a situation where she admits what she's really like, I guess. Because he obviously believes that every practitioner is a murderer under all that, right?
Yeah, and I guess like this is coming back to that interesting angle of having Clem here is like I don't think we'd get to see the nuance behind this if like even if this was the world where he was willing to engage just Avery in the conversation, the way he kind of has to explain things to an objective third party in Clem kind of means that he has to be like, I think you should kill them because Anthem Ted does murders that are never going to be avenged. So murder him. In a way, just
Yeah.
like he has to sort of face how that sounds to someone like Clem, who's like, "What are you talking about?"
Mm.
Sorry, I did forget to mention when we were in the small talk section. I think we learned Clem's partner's name here, Corey. But
Mm.
it was just it's a nice little detail to learn that apparently Clem has gone and sought someone out at least.
Yep. Yay, Clem. Well played.
Yeah, I don't know, because this is one of those things where I was like, I'm Wobbo was talking about potentially writing a spin off for Sergeant Hall, like way back in the day, and I don't know if that's still in the cards or not, because Pale's obviously grown since then. But like, it leaves me in this spot where I was like, we find out details about Clem, and I'm like, oh, this is nice to hear, but also I feel like the more we learn about Clem here, the more I feel like we're not getting Plex anytime soon. So I was like,
Mm.
don't tell us stuff about Clem. It all needs to be a mystery so that it can all be in her story.
Yeah. We'll find out more details about that in the Clem adventures.
Yeah, I
Um,
love that she's the fixer for Sergeant Horner too, because it was like, oh, Ted used to be doing it, and I was like, no offense, Clem, but like that's a huge step down if Ted was the one
yeah, I
handling it
know.
before.
I mean, like, we love Clem, but Ted is like, I don't know, Ted is wild.
He has experience.
Yeah, yeah, lots of experience. So yeah, Samaniego wants Clem to be a supplier of goods to the witch hunters, and Avery's like, well, let me just tweak that idea a little bit, um, in a way that I think makes Samaniego hate Avery forever.
Oh yeah, I love the way Avery is almost seemingly unknowingly at times just completely undermining his agenda here.
Yeah.
Because there's one bit where he sort of is like, "Oh, Clem, I can tell you all the secrets," and Avery won't. She could, but she won't. But I will. And Clem's like, "I
Mm.
don't know. People have been telling me that there's bad sides to that." And then he goes on this big tirade about like all of the items that she sold and all the bad stuff she's doing. And he's sort of all like, yeah, see, your ignorance is causing all this harm. And Clem starts to go, oh, I'm such an idiot. And Avery's like, no, you're not an idiot. And like supporting her. And like Samaniego just gives her this look because it's like, hey, I'm trying to manipulate her here.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, uh, it. I mean, I guess the theme of this whole chapter is like Avery really could have been murdered here so many times. You know, um, it's dangerous. It's very dangerous, the situation that Avery puts herself in, and doesn't seem to even, I don't know, like even realize that she's pissing off Samaniego so much. Like,
Yeah.
I can tell there are a number of times. Probably the reason that this happened, that the kind of reveal happens later in the chapter of all this stuff, is like he really wants to just fuck with her.
Yeah, again, it comes back to like bringing Clem in on this was an absolutely clutch call. Um, Samaniego is bending over backwards to make sure he doesn't lose Clem, which involves not murdering her friend. Um, like another thing I noticed actually is that Samaniego always refers to Avery as girl. He doesn't ever call her name. He always calls Clem Clem, but Avery
Mm,
is always just girl.
mm.
Like it's very otherizing, I guess. Like it's intentionally dehumanizing.
Yeah, that is interesting. I didn't notice that, but it's a very interesting a very interesting catch.
It was the sort of thing that made me wish Lucy was there because Lucy 100% would have been on that.
Yeah. Yeah, true. Um but hey, so Samaniego is kind of a sad sack, right?
Yeah.
Like uh, you know, I was kind of hoping he would be more like the guy with the good nose who seemed nice, but
Harris,
yeah,
I think.
but
Yeah.
he's not nice. He's just kind of sad. He tells this story about all his relationships have fallen over and failed. And I mean, Avery's too nice to say it, but the obvious thing to think is, so what's the common denominator
Yeah.
there, mate?
I was thinking the same thing. It's like, that saying where it's like, if you meet an asshole in the morning, you met an asshole. But if you meet assholes all day, you're the asshole.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
that feels like Samaniego summed up. Like he, he reminds me, like we've talked so much about Charles and that concept of like resentment that
Mm,
has come up with Charles, and Samaniego feels the same. Like he has let his obsession with destroying the magical world like ruin the human side of his life. Like And disconnecting him from that human side has just like increased the amount that like the hate filled side is in his life. Like he's clearly just festering in this negative cycle of violence. If Charles wasn't an other, I think they'd be good mates.
Yeah, yeah. I I think that's very true. uh,
But yeah, like you brought up his whole thing with his family, and like that's such a good example because it's like they all hate him and they don't like want anything to do with him. Um, but what's even funnier than that is like he brings this up because he's sort of like, don't ask about people's families. Nobody had asked about anyone's families. It's worth saying at this point. He just sort of
mm,
out of nowhere goes, don't ask about families. A lot of people in our line of work have terrible families. Like, look at mine. Like, blah blah. And just sort of goes
yeah.
completely unprompted, just sort of talking about how shit his life is. And I guess like, this could all be part of his scheme to like connect with Clem because she's obviously had like a rough life and lost her family and blah blah blah. Um, but it just, yeah, he like. I don't think it's a very good sales tactic because he just comes out and makes it clear how fucking miserable he is.
Mm. Yeah, he really is sad. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Also, so yeah, he's going on about like, oh, we don't have families, but practitioners are all about like dynasties or whatever. It's like, yeah, but not Avery. Like, real bad example. If we're talking about
yeah.
supportive families, I don't think Avery is the shining beacon of practitionerhood that you're after.
And she says something like that, and then he's like, "Oh yeah, but give it a few generations, and you're going to turn into a terrible dynasty," which is maybe not the worst response.
Yeah,
Like it's probably kind of true, but also it just kind of demonstrates that he doesn't have a solid understanding of these people, and he's just.
yeah,
I mean, he really is just applying a broad brush to them here, right? Like that's the whole thing he's doing.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so yeah, it's an interesting conversation that they're having here, I suppose.
yeah. I mean, something that comes up, which I wanted to bring up for you in the chat. Like, obviously,
Mm,
something they're still talking about Clem and whether Clem should get more info and become either more aware or whatever.
mm,
And I do find myself wondering if we still think she shouldn't do that. Like, obviously, Kenneth has made a bit of a thing out of like fucking with the rule that more awareness is straight up bad. And
yeah.
I can't help but look at Clem and see that she's kind of like trying to manage Sergeant Hall and kind of relying on other people a lot to do that and thinking like, wouldn't it be better for her and for everyone if she was just made either more aware or even awakened? Like, I don't
Mm,
think Samaniego would vote for that last one, um, but yeah, I just thought it was interesting that like Avery still seems very much on team, like not telling Clem stuff, and I thought it was interesting that Kenneth hasn't thought more about bringing her in that way.
mm. Yeah, yeah. I wonder if this is part of the Verona plan that we're getting hints at. Is like really just breaking down the barrier between innocent and aware, and because we're seeing so much of it and so much of the concept of awareness in this story that I feel like that's going to be continue to be important. Um,
Yeah, and Clem feels like one of the prime candidates for that because like across like every
yeah,
vector, it seems like it would be helpful for her, for the people around her. She's already kind of halfway there. Like, yeah, I just don't
yeah,
really, I don't really see the argument for keeping Clem where she is awareness wise. I suppose.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I reckon awaken her. Why not? Go
Yeah,
mad. Let's
yeah,
do it.
100%.
Burn it down. Um, so we now get to the other parts of this chapter, which is kind of juxtaposed parts of Avery's life that demonstrate the other series of dangers that she puts herself in. Starting with a conversation with Putnam, with Sky Putnam, where Avery and Sky talk about Janine's machinations, I guess you would say.
um, yeah, before that, though, there's this scene with like Nora and Avery at her
Yes.
locker. And I just wanted to bring it up because they're really going hard on this whole like Nora wearing the edible candy thing. And like it's cute or whatever. But part of me is just kind of like, do you think this is some of the snowdrop feedback into Avery that she's like, the big thing with her girlfriend now is dressing herself up in food? Like it just feels very Snowdrop.
I mean, yeah, I suppose it is interesting, the Snowdrop connection.
Well, yeah, I just couldn't help but read this as a bit of the Snowdrop feedback coming into Avery. Yeah.
Mm, yeah, yeah, that was fun. That's a fun call. Um, shall we talk about Jeanine? I'm very sad. I mean, like, I know there were lots of Jeanine red flags, but this has really sunk the true OTP of Jin Avery.
Yeah, this is what did it.
Yeah,
It was good up
finally,
until
finally,
now.
it's dead. I was still holding out hope until this chapter.
Yeah, it just right up until this chapter, it seemed fine.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Uh, no, I mean, obviously, uh, I remember we talked a lot in Arc 14 when Janine and Nora were first introduced about how they kind of slotted into the wolf and deer
Mm,
imagery for Avery, and then that stuff
mm,
kind of went into the background, and so did Janine. And so I thought it was really interesting that, like, as the wolf imagery came back in this chapter, in that first section with Samaniego, like we didn't bring it up, but the wolf comes up there in Avery's head, and now suddenly, like, Janine is back in the story too. Um, and like, obviously, there's some good stuff there, but what it gets me really excited for is Avery is still talking about going to the promenade again soon. So presumably we're finally going to get this third wolf encounter, and it's like, this the wolf imagery is coming back here for the chats with Samaniego and with Janine, and it's like it feels like we're heading towards this sort of final exploration of how Avery is going to interact with the wolves in her life, and the wolf side of herself.
yeah. Yeah, I think so too. It might not even be imagery. Janine might literally be the wolf. That would be a fun twist. But no, yeah, I think you're right. I think it's a very fun parallel between, uh, I guess, the wolves' dens that Avery willingly walks into with Samaniego, with the wolf. I kind of put this later in my notes because this is thought about and talked about throughout the entirety of these chapters with Janine. But like, this is the thing that the Page of Suns talked about, where Avery is like constantly ziplining over chasms on a piece of string. Like, that's to me the vibe this chapter gives off, of Avery just like willingly walking into very dangerous situations without considering how dangerous they are, I suppose.
Yeah, like it kind of felt a bit like yeah, the wolf imagery was quite strong, especially still in Arc 14, and then it kind of took a back seat as like Avery dealt with some other stuff, and we kind of got on this whole thing around her forming the connections and everything. And now we're kind of getting to the sticky end of making those connections, which is dealing with the bad faith actors. And as you say, like Avery kind of has to put herself out here like this, but there are going to be shitheels like Jeanine or Samaniego out there, and like the wolves will eventually be something she has to deal with. And so she kind of got away a bit with it for this last section of the story with not really having to address them so textually. And now, like, yeah, we're getting to the sticky end and they're coming back up. Um, and yeah, like Avery's going to have to figure out how she protects herself as she's careening over these abysses.
Yeah, yeah. I don't
Um,
know. It makes me worry for Avery this chapter, because Seveniego's point that he makes of you don't know how dangerous this situation is seems to be very consistently true for Avery.
yeah, I mean, she gets out of it. Like
That's true.
he says a lot, but she walks away.
Yeah, and both times she kind of gets out of the situation because of her connections, right? Like,
Yeah,
Clem being here is why she doesn't die. Putnam being here is why she doesn't have Nora get outed, I guess. So yeah, I mean, maybe Avery's right, and her strat's paying off.
yeah, she's doing what Kenneth was talking about in the next chapter about she's too well connected to fail.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, no, I guess it's interesting because I don't get the impression that we're done with Janine. Like it feels like this is going to cause her to potentially go nuclear. Um, and like same with Samaniego, I feel like he's going to be ticked at Avery and Kenneth as a whole. So there's this sort of vibe for me of like, yeah, Avery's had these encounters with the wolves and gotten them to back down, but they're still out there and they're still going to be wolfy. And I'm very interested. Like Samaniego kind of represents a bit of a final boss in terms of Avery's networking in the region. And as we potentially tie that in with the third big encounter with the actual wolf, I'm just so excited to see what we might get as a bit of a statement on how Avery handles this part of her life.
Mm, yeah.
Um, but backtracking a bit, can we just talk about how like awesome Putnam is? Like Avery sort of introduces her and kind of like makes her out to be more of a menace than she really is. Like every sort of like, yeah, she's a bit of a drama queen, and there's this great line where she's like, if there were human Fey hybrids, then Putnam maybe had like about an eighth of a Fey in her, not just in appearance, which is just a brilliant like bit of character intro to just set up. Okay, this person's a bit of a schemer. Um,
Mm.
but then all we see of Putnam in this chapter is she's just good and like she's team Avery. She's fucking hilarious. Like the bit where like she's carrying on about like oh this is our Nora. She's the team's Nora. She always comes and watches us practice for no reason. Like it's hilarious.
Yes, she is good, isn't she? Um, and she's clearly very friendly. Like she's kind of,
Yeah,
the type of person who you can tell is a bit of a chaotic force, but is chaotic good. So they're
yeah,
good. You know what I mean? Like it's she's fun. She's very fun.
yeah. Like I was just instantly like, oh, like yeah, Avery needs to keep hanging out with Putnam. She's great value.
Mm, yeah. Um, so we jump back to the conversation with Samaniego, and Samaniego is basically now giving more of a rundown of the witch hunters, I guess, to kind of convince Clem that they're legit. I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. That's sort of trying to justify themselves. I think it's funny that like Avery kind of outs him here that like what he's really looking to do here is start milking Sergeant Hall for recruits. Like he's the leader of an extremist gang that's looking to radicalize some angry, justifiably angry aware. Um, and it sets him up as another interesting villain in Plex.
Mm,
Please do Plex.
yeah, he would be the fun the fun overarching and not antagonist, but I guess antagonist, just like source of trouble.
Yeah, well, he represents in my mind a failure state for some of the aware if they get radicalized to becoming like career murderers under him.
Mm, yeah. Um, yeah. So, which part of the Witch Hunters do you think sounds the coolest? I like the idea of the Wraith Library. Sounded very fun up until the very end, where they were described as similar to Sharon, which
Yeah,
then kind of ruined all my hype for them.
I love that because Clem goes through the same things as well. She's like, "Oh, that sounds pretty good," and it's like, "Yeah, they keep people like Sharon around," and like Clem's just like, "Oh, no, no, thank you."
Never mind.
Yeah, like, is it worth it if you have to keep Sharons in your ranks? I don't know that it is. Um,
Yeah, surely that would force any any human being to reflect a bit more actively, but apparently not the Witch Hunters.
but yeah, no, like I do love the variety we're seeing in all these like witch hunter groups. Like obviously the lighthouse strike me as the most just like classically like the ones you see in Supernatural or like sorts of witch hunters. But then yeah, we've got like the library bookish nerds ones, which I'm easily impressed as bring up in the chat. So very similar to the Watchers in Buffy. We've got like the family. I think they were the Magogs or something, and it's like this family that's raising their kids to be witch hunters, and it's like, well, that's a lot. Um,
Yeah,
like it's just so fun how different they all are.
yeah, yeah. They're interesting, aren't they? And yeah, you're right. Very different, and you get the sense like not that aligned conceptually.
No, like Semineo talks about like Montreal, obviously is like the standout example for us, and even he's
Yes.
sort of like, yeah, I kind of have to work with them. Like I don't necessarily agree with all their methods, but you get the impression that that's kind of true for all of them to some degree.
Yeah.
Like he talks about, I think it's Long and Maze, who are like presumably a couple, and one of them's like a gilded lily, but others come and find her.
Mm,
Um, and it's a bit like, okay, yeah, but if they were aligned with you, then they'd just be members of the lighthouse. Like there has to be a reason that they're not officially with the lighthouse.
mm, yeah. It's worrying, I guess. Like 7 year ago, what's the point of you if all the witch hunters don't really align? Then why are you a figure that we should be talking to here? You know?
Well,
Like, what accountability can you give us even?
I do get the impression that the Lighthouse is one of the bigger
Yeah,
groups.
I don't
Montreal
know.
accepted, but they're far away. I
But
think
like
I,
making a deal with Samaniego then seems like it doesn't carry the weight that it needs if people like Montreal can just come in and do fuck shit, right? Like,
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
I think he has a fair amount of pull.
Mm,
It's just not like universal. Like it's not like a deal with San Diego is a deal with all the witch hunters. But like I think it'd be like being able to say you have an alliance with San Diego would like
mm,
cause most of the others to at least call and check. Um, I think what this really sort of demonstrates though is like how just similar the witch hunter situation really kind of is to the world of practitioners. Um, well, like the this diverse landscape of people all operating and kind of working together, but quite different. Like it's just it reminds me a lot of how a lot of practitioner society looks like, and I do think a recurring theme in a lot of this witch hunter rhetoric is that it's extremely hypocritical because they're quite similar in a lot of ways, like different in
mm.
some important ones, but like they gravitate towards the same sorts of power structures.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Interesting. Um, yeah, an interesting breakdown of the lighthouse groups though, which is very fun. I'm glad we got it.
Yeah, it feels like each one of them could have their own story. Like I'd read the story from the
Mm.
Magog's perspective about this family running around killing shit. I'd read the story about May's the gilded lily, but others always find her. I mean, that's like a free story because you set up right there. Of course, the interesting shit's going to keep happening. Like they literally attract others all the time.
Yeah.
Be like, oh, the story's getting a bit slow. Drop a like rolls dice fairy on them.
Yeah, just random shit keeps coming along and fucking with them. It does sound fun. Um, so yeah, Avery asks Samaniego what his goal is, and he plays a reverse card on that, and then just continues to burn Avery on it. And yeah, like Samaniegos whole point here is I don't want you to feel safe and secure because the less safe you are, the less bad practitioners are in general. Which is I don't know, like yeah, I get it. Kind of
it,
true.
Yeah, it's a very yes, but also no sort of argument. Like I see his point because the general philosophy of thinking like those who achieve the safety and security but still keep pushing to build it and like getting more power are terrible people is like demonstrably true in a lot of cases, and you just have to point at existing practitioner society
Mm.
to like see it. Um, but like then I think the thing that it comes back to for me is like if you're talking about anyone who gets safety and security or power of any sort is bad and needs to be stopped, then like part of me is like, then what's the point? Like even Charles, or like Charles's plan is everyone has to be miserable but have the chance to rise up and not be miserable. And so Samaniago's like stopping a turn earlier, and he's like, everyone has to be miserable, and you don't like,
Mm.
safety and security is bad.
Mm.
And it's kind of like, well, if nobody's allowed to be happy, if nobody's allowed to get security, then like, yeah, what the fuck's the point? Like, I'd rather pick the existing system over that. Like, that's such a bleak
Yeah.
outlook.
Yeah. It's it is bleak, and it is. I don't know. I don't. I kind of can see the warped logic of it, but I think you're right.
Yeah.
It's not a system that can ever really work for anybody, right?
Well, because like, I think the thing is he's made that step of realizing, yeah, like they're a problem. Like you have the people like Massa who are safe and secure and power hungry, and they're bad, and like so we need to take them down a peg. But he's not focusing at all on like building anything. Like again, even Charles is at least trying to build something. It's stupid, but like at least he has a goal in mind. Whereas Samaniego doesn't seem to have ever made it past the like tear it down part. Like he's so focused on tearing it down, he doesn't really seem to have any picture of what building something good looks like.
Mm.
Um, I guess the closest you come to that is he just thinks magic is bad and he just wants to eliminate magic and everyone is innocent, I guess, which is like,
Mm.
stupid. Um, especially because like I can sort of get why witch hunters and stuff would have the perspective magic bad because
Yeah.
magic can certainly be bad.
Of course.
But Avery is like a path runner, which is like the quintessential example of how magic can be like cool and fun and interesting and like whimsical. And so it's just like she's just like the worst person to be making this argument to because her
No,
practice is
yeah.
like the best counterexample.
I mean, and just like from a standpoint of all the things that Avery tries to do, I think if Samaniego was having this conversation with Verona, like it would, I think it would land even more because Verona
Yeah.
feels like she's closer to, a traditional practitioner along these things, right?
Mm.
Whereas with Avery on the other side of the table here, you're just kind of like, but look, it's
Yeah.
Avery. Like,
Yeah.
look at what she does.
Exactly. Like, yeah, it's she's just such a ridiculous person to be trying to make this case to. And like, because this is like, yeah, that's so much Avery's thing. Like, we're talking about how he's building this like
Mm,
bleak worldview where any security or safety or power is bad, and it's just like Avery is such a good example of how that's not true because she's risen from that bad place and she's gotten better and she's making everyone around her better. That's why you're at the fucking table here. Like, it's just, yeah.
mm,
It's
yeah.
yeah, it's just it's a shame because he's like yeah, as you said, he's so close. Like he's not wrong that a lot of the people who've amassed this power are corrupt and need like shit done. It's just he refuses to even consider, oh, maybe Kenneth is trying to do it better. Like,
Mm,
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I will say though, I do really like the point that he made that you brought up before, which is when you start talking about families like in dynasties, it becomes tricky. And I think this is a really good point because this is like Avery's great, obviously, but if you know 5 generations down, all it might take is one bad egg before you've got
Mm,
another Alexander or a Musa or a Bristow or whatever.
yeah.
Um, and I think this is such an interesting wrinkle because it's a thing we haven't really seen addressed as part of Mrs. Plan, and it's like a societal problem in general. Like I see it as a problem with any model of society. Really, is like it's ridiculous to not expect someone to do their best to like give their kids the best opportunities. Like someone like Avery, if she had kids, they're going to be more inclined to be good candidates to be like her replacement and to take the mantle of Kenneth practitioner or whatever because she's going to be raising them, she's going to want that for them. Like it's ludicrous to think that they're not going to get some sort of advantage. So to some degree there's always going to be something like that, and so it's like you can't ever sort of develop this full equality where everyone has equal opportunity because like there will just be an advantage to being Avery's kids in terms of like becoming Kenneth practitioner or something.
Mm, yeah. I mean, you can't. I don't know. Like, you can't get around that, right? There's no
No,
way to.
I mean, the only thing you can is what all those like really edgy, like teen, young adult, dystopian futures things do, which is where kids are taken from their parents and put in casts or whatever the fuck. Like that's
Yeah.
like that. That's sort of the only thing I can think of that like avoids that. But I think it's like an interesting thing to talk about because like it is still going to be a problem with like Mrs. Plan. I mean, there's ways around it. Like obviously, there's limits to how high the stations are or how low the worst stations are.
Yeah.
So it can be like not that bad, but it's always going to kind of be a problem that the kids of the successful people will have more opportunities just by nature of where they were born. And so it's like about mitigating it, not completely canceling it.
Yeah, and I think if the system is built around others providing power to people in the way that Kenneth provides power to the Kennetiers, like, I
Yeah,
think,
hopefully the shit heels will never get that edge.
yeah, like you'll need to, or even one who potentially might turn into a shitheel will have to kind of learn to not be a shitheel by virtue of needing to be responsible for people and kind of accountable to people, you know?
Yeah, and they'll like there'll be systems to remove them if they do turn out to be a shit
Yeah.
heel.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like they're doing a pretty good version of it. Like they're doing the
Yeah,
closest.
but like I understand why someone like Samaniego would not see that because I do think there's always going to be the problem of some disparity based on inheritance to some degree.
Mm, yeah,
It's just about making it not as huge a gap as it is right now.
yeah.
Uh,
Um,
So I just want to pull out this quote from Avery before we move on, which
mm,
I think just summarizes this whole segment perfectly, which is just where Avery says, I think I get the idea behind witch hunters and why we need them, like what they're doing. I just haven't seen one I'd trust. And I
Mm.
was like, that's such a good way of summarizing the thing. Like, witch hunters exist for a reason. They're this natural counterbalance. They're trying to pick up work that is being slacked off by practitioners, but God, they're doing it in a shit way.
Yeah.
Like,
Um,
I love the bit where Diego kind of judges Avery for not being the executioner. He's like, "What? So you're judge and jury and court and police in your town, but suddenly you can't be executioner?" And Avery's kind of like, "It's not that I can't be. I don't want to." Like,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, then we get to this moment where Samaniego reveals how dangerous the situation Avery has put herself in. And it's very cinematic, and I love it. And we kind of talked about it, like Avery is so desperate to make connections that she will put herself in situations that are very dangerous without ever really realizing how dangerous it is, I suppose.
yeah, but it's working.
Yeah.
No, I do think you're right. I think this, like, I could see this being part of this thread that seems to be coming back into the story, which is like sort of deciding how Avery is going to manage the wolves in her life. Like, because bearing your neck to them to some degree is going to be like a decision that she needs to make there.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. Um, but yeah, so Nora and Avery head to the party. Avery confronts Jeanine and it almost goes very, very poorly before Putnam comes in with the save.
I love Nora's mum at the start here too. Like, she's such a helicopter parent. It's so frustrating. Um, but also it gets mentioned that Nora might be coming around for some post Christmas time in Kennet, which is a very exciting
Mm,
prospect.
indeed.
There are going to be many people who can't wait to meet Nora in Kennet, I believe, and we'll have to dress a lot of them up.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, like, Avery has thought about. I want to talk about this because it also kind of comes up next chapter for me. Like, bringing important people to Kennet. Does that now mean kind of awareing them? Like, because Avery's talked about potentially awareing Nora a few times.
Mm.
And we get Sylvie who's coming to Kennet, as is hinted in the next chapter. And I'm just kind of like, sorry, Sylvia. I just keep thinking like now that some parents are aware, it feels very strange to me. Like I don't feel like, for example, Connor is going to be good at keeping that secret. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I do. I mean, I guess this is the thing. Like, it has to be a consideration for each of them now, at least. Like, as you said, with some of the parents aware, it kind of feels like, the floodgates are open to an extent. And now it's like, when you're bringing anyone into Kennet, especially considering it now stands as a place that's intentionally fucking with innocence, you have to at least have the conversation of whether you're going to do that for Sylvia, for Nora,
Mm,
for basically anyone else close to them that they bring in.
mm,
But I do think it's still a different conversation for each one. Like with Nora, I mean, I guess it's up to Avery on how she feels the relationship is going. I would be so worried about making a permanent change to someone's life like that if you weren't pretty sure in the relationship. And how
yeah,
sure can you be at their age?
yeah, yeah.
Um,
No, I think that's true.
but
I just kind
yeah,
of worry that the further Kennet goes into like this like magical town, the more bringing someone to Kennet basically just means that you're gonna be putting yourself in a situation where you have to aware them. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, or it's just going to get more and more awkward to if Nora comes and visits and she's not really aware, she can only engage in like 20% of Avery's life there.
yeah, you're right.
So you don't really have to, but it's just like it's just going to get more and more weird if you don't.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think that will be an interesting conversation Avery might have to have with someone at some point because it seems a bit soon to me, but like I, I don't know.
yeah. Um. So yeah, this scene at the party, it just is like I found it. I would. It's so. I would find it so exhausting to be in this scenario. You know, like the social dynamics here are so frustrating. um, and I think it's great to present it as another type of wolf that Avery just walks into their den. I think it's very apt. And yeah, I mean, like she
Also, sorry,
just goes for it.
it's just funny Samaniego getting compared to Jeanine, I think he'd be really offended by that, and that makes it even better.
Yeah, you're right. I think if that would get to him in a very fun way. But yeah, so Avery's put herself in another worrying social situation, another wolf's den, I suppose. But she gets
Yeah.
out of it okay, so thumbs up.
Yeah, and so it's just funny that you call it the wolf's den because it's clearly Janine's den and not her mum's because her mum is just a sloppy mess off to the side, which was a beat I quite enjoyed. Because we definitely had parents like that at my high school.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, so this is where we learn that Janine is, trying to start the rumors that Avery is a prostitute. Is some sort of revenge play. And my favorite part of this has to be when Nora comes in and she sort of finds out like Avery's like they're saying that I'm a prostitute or something, and like Nora just laughs.
mm.
And I thought that was so good because, like, that. What better way to summarize how stupid that rumor is? Anyone who knows Avery knows
Yes,
that,
it's
like,
obviously ridiculous.
like Avery is probably the last person in this story who would ever like want to enter that line of work. It's just such a ridiculous accusation to level at her of all people,
Mm,
and especially like it felt very nice guy, TM to be like for Janine to be like Avery doesn't want to sleep with me. She must be a hooker.
mm.
Like it's very you always see nice guys throwing those sorts of accusations around.
Yes, for sure. It's a real nice guy thing to do. You're right. But yeah, it goes okay. Putnam makes the save, and we flash back to the Samaniego and Avery conversation where Samaniego drops one final bomb. The Wild Hunt is on their way into Kennet.
So good. I was excited for this.
Yeah. What a fun tease. We're getting so much fun shit set up for this arc.
Yeah, I remember a lot of people when this arc title first got shown to us in 19.1. I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, Wild Hunt,"
Mm,
and I'd started to be like, "Oh, maybe not," because we're dealing with the negatives at the moment. So maybe it's not the Wild Hunt, I guess. And then this chapter happened. I was like, "Oh, yeah, both." No, I'm an idiot. That's on me for underestimating Pale for the billionth time.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, Gosh, what's even? I don't know. What even is going to happen? Who knows? We'll get to more of what might happen next chapter, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just while we're talking about the Wild Hunt, like I think
Mm,
what's really fun about them is there's like there's it feels like there's a handful of different ways that they're like tied to Kennet. Like
yes.
obviously there's Guillermo and all the shit
Hmm.
surrounding him.
Yeah.
Something that comes up in the next chapter is how they're probably not going to think too kindly of all the shit Toad swallows up to.
Yep.
And then obviously they're here to look into Marisica on the behalf of Massa and presumably Estrella.
Yep.
So there's like they're also just kind of here to fuck with them to soften them up for Massa as well. So like
Yep.
there's this is fucking fairy bullshit. There's like four different threads that are going to be interplaying in how they choose to interact with this town, and that's going to be so fun.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very. It's very worrying.
Yeah, I mean I do. Wait, this is halfway through the chapter, but I'll just bring it up now. There's a moment where Verona is like, "Oh, we can use the visceral glamour to hide stuff in the market from the Wild Hunt," and part of me was like, What does Kennet need to hide from them?" I was confused by that.
Mm, yeah. Uh,
Like, we're talking about how there's like so many reasons they're here, but part of me was like, I don't understand what they need to hide with visceral glamour that
yeah.
would be hideable with visceral glamour.
You're right. I think I was just more thinking of like the visceral glamour stuff at all being part of it.
But you wouldn't hide that in the market in visceral glamour, would you? Like
Mm,
why that line jumped out to me. I was like, I don't understand what that. So there's potentially another angle that I don't even understand for how they're coming into Canada affects things.
mm. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll find out when it, when it pops off.
Yeah. I'm easily impressed is also bringing up the fun thing about the Wild Hunt. It's like what like they don't actually have like authority, TM, right? Like there's no clause in the seal being like, oh, but also the Wild Hunt can come and fuck you up. Like their authority extends for how much power they have.
Mm.
Um, like because even uh, Masa was technically the lord of some shit that meant something spiritually. Like it was dumb, but there were rules backing him up. I don't think the Wild Hunt has that same cachet, but they're just really scary.
Yeah, I still don't even really feel like I have a solid grasp of exactly what they will do. I
Yeah,
just kind of know
exactly.
that they're very terrifying.
Yeah, that's what's going to be so fun about them is it's like there's no rules for them, which means there's no concept of them abusing their power because they don't actually have any. They're just going to like get to do whatever they want, I guess. And yeah, we don't quite know exactly what that's going to look like for them. We know that they're all insanely powerful, scary fairy from a variety of courts, but what does that mean?
Yeah, yeah. Um, I guess we'll find out.
Yeah,
I don't
it's gonna
know.
be fun.
Uh, so yeah, in 19.6, it opens with Verona having a great or terrible idea as Macaulay, Mal, and Lucy help build a sauna.
I love how we learned that the sauna was actually kind of an accident. Like they were just building a cool room for Tashlet, and I was like, okay, so it should be warm. It's got to be humid, and okay, now we're hanging out in a sauna. Oh well. Um, like that's just such a funny series of events.
Mm,
Also, all of them came and volunteered to build this shelter for Tashlet, which I just loved as a contrast to Brett in his basement.
yeah.
Like Verona hasn't always had the best relationship with Tashlet, but she'll happily just seemingly of her own volition just decide to come out here, recruit all her friends to build an extension to her house. But
Yeah.
Brett was fucking pulling teeth getting her to do anything in that basement.
Yeah, because it's Brett. Um,
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
but talking about Verona and Tashlet, can we talk about their relationship? I don't know. Like, it feels very arm's length to me.
See, I don't know that I agree. I
Mm,
I mean, yeah, them, it might not be quite the same as it was beforehand, but to an extent, that's like we've talked about the same thing with the Kenneteers. I thought it was interesting that Verona seemed to be much more comfortable around Tashlet than she was last time we saw them hanging out together. Like before, it was like every time she saw her, Verona was thinking, "Oh, it's so awkward." After I made that offer of familiarship and she rejected it. Whereas now it was just more, I don't know, they felt just kind of like friends again. Like this felt like they're on the path to doing what I think Tashlet suggested, which is reevaluating that offer in a couple of years.
mm, yeah, I don't know. It felt at a distance to me. It
Yeah,
felt like they weren't super close anymore, which is kind of sad.
I I, I don't know. I just think that was because there were like five people in the room. I didn't necessarily think they were.
Mm,
I thought this
okay.
was a huge improvement over the last time we saw them, at the very
Well,
least.
sure. I suppose it's going back in the right direction.
Yeah, but I would say I was surprised how much it's done that. Like I thought it
Mm,
was a lot better than it was.
yeah, yeah.
Um, but
Um,
also, so while we're on the topic of Tashley, just quickly, her inner form, because she can take her skin off now,
mhm.
and she looks like an eye covered alien thing, very Asgardian. Like,
Yeah.
it was one of those things where I was like, I feel like this is Wildbow giving us a hint about like something about her transformation or what she's turning into or something, but I have no fucking clue what it means. I just was like, oh, cool.
Yeah. It was cool. You're right. It was cool. Um, I like Verona announces, I've had a great or terrible idea, and then like doesn't explain what the idea is for like ages, like a really long time. Um, so yeah, Verona's it's a real B tier maneuver from Verona here.
I I even more strongly disagree with this statement that you've just made. I often feel like I have the same sort of thing, which is I have the idea, but I need time to make sure it like makes sense in my head before I say it, or at least find the right words to say it.
Why does she need to announce, "Hey everyone, wait, I've got this great idea," and
And she
then
says she
isn't
wants it
able
to
to?
she wants it to get marked so she doesn't forget.
That's uh, I don't know. I don't know. It's I just would find I would find that interaction frustrating.
Yeah, I don't know. It seemed perfectly reasonable to me. I was 100% behind it. I get why it would be annoying. I think was it Macaulay who agrees with you?
Yes.
Um, but it made sense to me. I'm going to start doing it more.
Oh no.
I'll just say I have a good idea, and then just 2 minutes of silence on the podcast while I put it
Yeah.
together. And luckily, we trim the silences,
Yeah,
so no
luckily
one will ever know.
so it's fine. But I do like the way that this idea kind of unfolds, I guess,
Yes.
over the course of this chapter. Like, Verona gives an initial explanation of it. Toady comes in and adds to it. It keeps getting built up and built up, and then eventually we see it at the end. Like, it's a very the chapter is tracking this idea from inception to execution, and it is like it is really fun, like structure for the chapter.
Yeah, because we follow the idea, like literally
Yes,
from its genesis. That's how the chapter
yes,
opens to seeing it in effect at the end. And you're right, like it's we see all the different people who contribute to it, and it grows. Like what I like about this is another chapter with a number of like section breaks, but
mm.
each one really connects in terms of like lines. Like there's that one where I'm thinking of where Verona is explaining it to Toady, and she's like, "So that's why we bring in," and then it like cuts, and then she's like, "And so that's why we bring in like Alpi," and
Mm.
like it sort of directly connects the thought. But we're seeing it like after Toadslaw has also contributed to the plan, so we're kind of seeing the next evolution. So there's like this really cool way where we step through all the different segments, but in a way that's really natural because it's also like as the plan is tying together for us.
Yeah.
I don't know if that made sense what I'm trying to say, but yeah, like like the plan's sort of changing through each step, but we're following that progression from segment to segment in a really close way.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, like I think the big thing that jumped out to me about that is like this is another case where I'd point to how much Verona has grown over this time skip and the period just before the time skip. Like, if you think back to like Arc 13 or 14 Verona,
Mm.
everything was like, or other people contributing to her plans was like a loss for her because, it was like her not proving herself. Like back
Yeah.
in the day, everything like she was so insecure that like other people contributing was just her not pulling her weight.
Mm.
Now she's in this better space mentally, and it's like she's relishing the opportunity to bounce these ideas off everyone, like including Lucy, who was like a big part of, or a big face of a lot of that frustration back in the day. Like yeah, like she's proud of the parts she does and doesn't let like getting help from other people come across as a negative like she used to. It's such a huge
Yeah.
improvement for
You're
her.
right. It does feel like a big growth for her. And it just is this like really nice feeling of the town. This idea goes through different stages, right? First being bounced around here with kind of Verona's immediate friends, then with Toady, then with the council as a whole, and like it kind of gets built to and added to and made better at every step of that.
Yeah.
And it's really cool, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And like this is the sort of shit she can more easily do now that she's okay with coordinating with people like that, which she just like wasn't before.
Mm.
And I mean, like this is one of the things is like I think across the board, we're seeing how it feels to me like the Kennetys are just doing so much better at shit like this and like working as a team and like if you think back to Arc 13, like the big thing in Arc 13 was that Marissa managed to make it so that the Kennetys weren't really working together, even though they were always together.
Mm.
And now they've been apart for like 5 arcs.
Yeah.
They're all very much doing their own thing. They've grown into very different people. And yet, like, all these secret conversations between Lucy and Verona, how, like, just the stuff, it's like, it feels like they're almost more in sync than they ever have been, despite the fact they're more different than they ever have been. Um,
Mm.
and it's what, like, it's one of the reasons it is starting to feel to me like we're heading towards the finale or whatever. But there's this real sense that, like, even though the culprits have done it again and taken away the dreams so the Kennetys can't communicate, it's like another attempt to make them separated. It feels like they're more in sync than they ever have been.
Mm.
Um, and it's just, yeah, really encouraging, I guess. Feels like they're about
Yeah.
to get a win.
Yeah, I hope so. We'll have to see when the Wild Hunt comes in to fuck with shit.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, that's going to be one of the really interesting things because I remember in 19.1, we kind of talked about how that chapter just felt like a victory lap for Verona and how much she's improved.
mm,
And I'd say the same thing about 19.6. Feels like we've had two Verona chapters in a row where I've just been like, my major takeaway from the chapter has been, fuck, Verona's in a really good place right now.
mm,
And part of me's then also like, well, I don't think we're close enough to the end of the story that she's not going to have some sort of like, character arc to work on. So like, I feel like another shoe's going to drop for her relatively soon. There's going to be something she's going to have to overcome.
mm,
Um, and I can't figure out what it might be, but it is going to be interesting. And the
yeah,
Wild Hunt might be involved. Yeah,
yeah. Um, so Verona here, they head out from Tashlitz. Verona does some alchemy, sends Mal and Macaulay on some errands, while Lucy and Verona have a coded chat.
they should have waterboarded Mal.
Mm-hmm. You
Hashtag
don't
under
get that
city
many
rights.
opportunities to waterboard somebody. You got to take your opportunities where you can get them. You know.
But so you don't get too many opportunities to ethically waterboard somebody.
Sure.
You
I mean
could
that was kind of
theoretically go
implied,
out
but
and
yeah.
waterboard somebody right now, Ruben.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but no, I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I was kind of like vibing with like Lucy or maybe even Mal here, where I was like, I mean, I do kind of want to see what all the fuss is about.
Mm, yeah.
Um, like yeah, when Lucy was like, I don't know, I'm kind of tempted to let you do it. I was like, yeah, I think that's where I'd be. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm kind of. She seems keen. I kind
Want
of
to
want to
see what
see
it's
it.
like? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I guess sorry, talking about Macaulay and Mal, like as they go off on their errand, um, we do get another tease about like Macaulay and her upcoming like decision regarding her family and all that.
Mm,
And just like reading this, it made me realize like how crazy stressed I am for Macaulay about it because like I don't really know what she should do either. Like every time it comes up, I as a reader, I'm like I don't know what Macaulay should do, and it's really stressing me out. Like I want her to say no to her parents, but also I think the last thing her and Kenneth needs is the potential for the Hennigers to be coming after her.
mm, yeah. Um, yeah. You're right. This has kind of been simmering away in the background since that conversation with Verona a little bit ago. And I don't know. I'm worried
Yeah.
about it, right?
Exactly. Like that's I don't really have any statement to make on it aside from it is causing me stress, and I hope it happens soon, just so like it's over and we're all out of our misery, well, except
Mm,
for maybe Macaulay.
yeah.
Um, and then there's also Mal, whose thing in this chapter is her like whole double date
Yep.
plan.
Yep.
Um, which like I feel like Verona should do it. And my
Yeah.
argument for this is it's pretty clearly not going to be a date. Like Verona will very openly just be there to run interference for Mal so she can get with the guy who is constantly asleep because apparently that's what she's interested in. Um
Mm,
but I just think it sounds like a hilarious no pressure time. I feel like Verona should say yes because I don't feel like there's any real pressure, and it sounds like it's going to be a hilarious mess.
mm. Yeah, I do think it will be really wild and fun.
Yeah.
And I think Rhoda should do it too. I mean, I totally get why she doesn't want to. Like, obviously, it all makes
Well,
sense, but
I think this is like fundamentally different from like what was happening with Lucy and Jeremy and Wallace though, because like it was obviously a much touchier subject with Jeremy, who was like a boy she was friends with benefits with, or I don't know what term to use, but like like going on a date with him was like a fundamentally important thing that she didn't want to do.
mm,
Whereas, like, this doesn't feel like an actual date to me. It's like with some guy she like isn't going to have any interest in, or maybe she will, but like whatever. But it's like it's not a date. It's just like a hanging out with friends, running interference from Al, and getting up to stupid undercity hijinks thing. Like it
yeah,
doesn't feel like
exactly.
it'd actually be a date.
Yeah, it's not a date. It's more just a friend hang.
Yeah, like yeah, like they could call it a date, but that like it isn't in like
But I don't
essence a date.
know. Maybe the fact that they're calling it a date does give it more weight, more date weight. You know, whereas if it
Yeah,
was like we're just gonna hang out, Verona would be fine with it because they're explicitly calling it out as just hanging out rather than being a date. You know?
I think that's kind of what she says at the end, and yeah, I guess
Yeah.
I mean, I'm the sort of I just wouldn't let the label affect me. I'm like, call it whatever you want. That's not what I'm doing here. Like, if it was me, I'd just be like, look, I'm just here because Mal wants to hook up with your friend, so like, that's
Mm,
why I'm here. But if it matters to Verona, then yeah, whatever.
mm,
But I think it sounds like a hilariously bad time, and she should do it.
yeah. um, should we talk about Verona's secret plan? I mean, like, I guess the hint that we get here is that she talks about law practices and subverting the rules being important. And I think we kind of already knew that would probably be important, but it's good to have that being confirmed, I suppose.
Yeah, like it seems like you know her plan revolves around fundamentally changing something about the judges, well, at least one thing about the judges. So it does kind of make sense, but it's cool to see that they're going to be specifically leaning into this, especially Lucy. Like, I do feel like this is right up her alley, um, as Verona says. So yeah, as you say, it not surprising really that they're going to dive into this, but it's cool to see them doing it. It's very hype.
Yeah, it'll be fun to when we do find out what Verona's plan tweaks are, going back and looking at these clues. Um,
Yeah,
so then Verona has a nice homework related chat with her mum, and what a nice chat it is. Like,
yeah.
because we get this reveal. Again, Verona does the thing that would annoy me if I was talking to her in real life, where she doesn't let she starts seeding something and then refuses to say what it is until much later. But anyway, the reveal when it comes that Verona is really like nailing her schoolwork is very delightful and very fun.
You're right. It's just again, that victory lap energy for Verona right now is so strong.
Yeah.
I think like one of the standouts to me is like the self reflection surveys are something Verona credits as being a really important part of that.
Mm,
Um, which again, that felt like something that Verona early story really struggled with. Like, I think we used to constantly call her out for her inability to sort of identify what was going on with her, and her whole like plan to turn into an other, but she didn't know what she wanted it to look like. Like,
mm,
that was the sort of mistake she kind of kept making, and so she identifies here. She's like, oh yeah, that's something that I kind of contend to do, and these self reflection surveys cause me to stop and actually think about it, and I'm realizing that's really valuable.
mm,
um, and I especially love that, like, she's doing that because it's coming from like her homework. Like, I think it's so important that it's like her Kennett above schoolwork is making her do that, and she's in a good enough place that she can like see the advantages of it. Um,
mm.
like she's just she's doing so well.
Yeah. Yeah. She is. She's doing great. It's really nice. It's just like really nice.
Yeah, yeah, and like again, I can't wait to see where she goes from here because there's going to be there's going to be something that comes up that like is Verona's next like chapter of her character journey, but she feels like she's in the best place ever to like overcome it. So I don't think it's going to be something that completely derails her, but it's going to be so interesting to see how this like new Verona is capable of handling the next big obstacle in her life.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, we also get the information that Sylvia's going to want to come to Kennet soon, and we kind of talked about this a bit a second ago.
Mm.
But yeah, how is this going to go? How will Connor and Jasmine interact with Sylvia without blowing this? I don't know. We'll see.
I think they'll be mostly fine. It'll probably just be a few awkward things where they'll be like, "Oh, don't worry about it," or like they can lie, so they're not as strapped as the Kenneteers are.
Mm,
But yeah, I mean, like as we touched on, I think like yeah, with every close character visiting Kennet, you have to ask the question of do we make them aware, and like you get the vibe that Jasmine would vote yes, and maybe was even trying to tilt the scales a bit by suggesting Sylvia come visit. Um, like I don't think Jasmine is going to force it or anything, but I think like if you ask Jasmine if Verona should do it, I think Jasmine's going to say yes. Um, and I don't know. I'm curious what everyone else thinks about whether awake or not awakening, making Sylvia aware is a good
awarening.
call.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it'll be fun. I want just from the perspective of like the parents are such I guess this is backwards, but the parents are such reflections of their kids slash vice versa, whatever.
Oh, yeah. Every time
Um,
Sylvia comes up in this story, we make note of how good she'd be at this world.
yeah, and I just want to see that, like I just want to
Yeah.
see it. I think it would be fun.
Yeah, sorry, definitely from a like as a reader, I want to see it. I guess I'm just thinking like in world, I think there is an argument to be made that like Sylvia doesn't live here and also like has a lifestyle that I don't think would be conducive to being aware because I get the impression she travels a lot and stuff and like
Mm,
that sounds especially with the current climate of Ontario, that feels like a risky thing for someone who's aware to be doing. I don't know.
mm,
Like, don't get me wrong, I think for Verona, it would be a net good if Verona can see that, and I think as a reader, I want it, but, like, there's an argument against it.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I think it would be fun, and therefore
I
should
hope they
happen.
do it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's all the reasoning I need.
Um,
Um,
sorry, yeah, I do wanna mention, like, I was talking about how much Verona is vibing with her schoolwork. There was this
mm,
hilarious moment where, Sylvia sort of says, "Oh, if you're that far ahead, but you're worried about potentially not retaining it all, maybe ask for like a practice test or something to verify. Like get your teachers to give you a practice test." And Verona was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, good idea," and like writes it down on a note. And part of me was like, "Who are you, and what have you done with Verona? Like, is this the fetch? Has
mm,
it secretly replaced her? Because it's like such a huge leap from where she used to be, like more than any of the others that we've already gone on about in these past few weeks. This was the moment where I was like, wow, Verona's come a long way. She's signing up for extra practice tests.
mm. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there are the two reads. The one read is wholesome and Verona's doing well, and the other read is something strange is going on.
Yeah, yeah, her fetch has replaced her, obviously.
um, but yeah, so Toady has dropped by at the tail end of this conversation. So he talks through the plan with Verona, and then they then pitch it to the council pretty quickly.
Yeah, and shout out to what is probably one of the best lines in all of Pale now, which is the bit where Toad Sawyer describes Mal as a tit, but the sort of tit that runneth the bra cup over.
Yeah,
Great
a great
line.
line. Um, but yeah, I mean, let's talk about the idea for the market, shall we? Because like it is very fun and kind of an expansion on Verona's bookstore idea, which I think is great. But also, they're kind of walking over the line into doing something that's potentially morally dodgy, right? Like, um, yes, it's kind of backed karmically, I suppose. But we see one example later of this is not entirely positive here. Like they're not just putting good vibes out into the world, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, this is what like that's like the whole Undercity like
Yes,
goblin
it's
toad slow
true.
vibe. Like to me this ties into the mission statement Verona made when she claimed her domain about like
Mm,
taking those dark, like mucky parts of the world and like getting the good parts and helping those to flourish.
mm,
Um, like part of me would actually argue that it's like the Undercity and the Goblin Market or whatever, like that's already there, and like if we're not integrating it with the Innocents, then we're sort of openly supporting segregating it, which I don't necessarily think helps anyone. That's how things like the Undercity and the Goblins get so bad. Um, like it's tying these things together that mitigate their worst tendencies.
mm,
Um, so it's like, yeah, while the market is certainly not ideal in the positive to negative ratio that it gives off, it's like it feels like a really important step in the right direction to me. Of like, the peddling's all about connecting people with something that will help them, I suppose.
mm,
And it's not necessarily the cleanest ways of doing it, but it's turning something that could be a lot worse and helping it like find power in being kind of good as
mm.
a start, at least.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe,
Like it
hopefully.
it reminds me of the conversations we had about like Biscuit a lot. Like as long like if things like this are helping somebody like Biscuit be the version of themselves that's actually helping people and causing a net positive, I kind of can't help but see that as a good thing because
Mm,
Biscuit was already here. Biscuit's already doing that thing. You may as well get her doing it in the way that's like as good as it can be, and that's what this market and like Toadslow's whole thing and can it kind of stand for.
Mm, yeah, yeah, um, yeah. I guess you're right. I just like we see later in the chapter. I don't know. It's okay. It ends up being okay. It just is
Yeah.
slightly
Well, no, I mean, yeah, they're
it's
like
close to the line, right?
I mean, they're working on, like, that's the thing. The old
Yeah,
bodies kind of, do a dodgy one, but that's why, like, that's when you have Verona and Lucy to kind of
yeah,
come in and
yeah,
make it better. Like that's what this whole thing is about, I guess. I don't know. Like, yeah,
yeah,
I totally get what you're saying. Like, it's not ideal, but I think this is like a huge step in the right direction for all this sort of stuff.
yeah, yeah. All right, fair enough.
I also think it's really funny because part of me can't help but read what's going on here is Verona being like, "Oh, Charles, you want to manage dream related shit then? Well, here you go. We're
Here
gonna
you
make
go,
that
have
messy
fun.
as
Yeah,
fuck."
yeah, good stuff.
Like, yeah, if Charles backs off managing all this extra hullabaloo surrounding the dream business, then it's like, okay, well, we'll go back to meeting in dreams then. Like, that's such a funny play.
Yeah, it is great. It is just like I do love that their strategy to deal with Charles has kind of just been do big fucked up shit. Do a new wild plan every single week and they can never keep up.
Well, yeah, and because he's taking on all this work, like
Yeah,
he's going up to
yeah,
the other judges and being like, "Give me more work," so he's like spreading himself thin potentially. And Verona's like, "I'm
yeah.
going to spread him even thinner by making every of these new aspects just an absolute fucking nightmare to deal with."
Yeah, that'll show him.
Um, and yeah, we should talk about Alpi too, because obviously there's like, I think Alpi is like another thing that sits in this market of like not ideal but still better. Like we've criticized to absolute hell the way Alpi's shtick doesn't actually like help people. Like she gives them the nightmares, but there's no guarantee they actually come out of it better. Like it's like an exercise left to the nightmare that they actually use it to improve themselves.
Mm,
And as Verona brings up, it's like this is actually kind of helping Alpi fix that side of her job. Like these people come out of it with a
yeah,
improvement of some degree.
yeah, yeah. It does seem very helpful for Albie, for sure.
And Alpi has an absolute fucking ball. I love that like Alpi's really nervous at first because, she doesn't like change and she's very like comfortable in her groove. And then we do see her later and she's just absolutely having a ball. Um and it's like I don't know what you expected, Alpi. Like turns out after 500 years of doing the same thing, a bit of variety is fun actually. Like shocker.
Mm, yeah. Um, yeah. Alfie does have a good time, and that's very sweet.
But yeah, I guess another character I want to talk about here a lot is like Toad Slow. Like we haven't actually talked about Verona's essentially business partner at this point is kind of the vibe I'm getting. Like they're becoming a real powerhouse duo and they're working together a lot. And I don't see that slowing down at all. Like because their plans are so aligned now. Like Verona has sort of scope creeped from I want a bookshop to the best thing for my bookshop is to be the centerpiece of an economic powerhouse region wide. Um, so she scope creeped to making that place, and that obviously vibes so much with Toad Slow's plan. So the two of them are like working together more and more, and I think like they bring out the best in each other. And I'm so excited to see them keep hanging out.
Mm,
Like,
yeah, they're a good
yeah,
team, aren't they?
yeah, well, and like Toad Slow's whole eighth court market idea is centered around this exact same idea as Verona's mission statement, which is taking the good parts of goblindom and like helping them flourish and like growing them in a better way. It's like on so many levels, Toadswallow and Verona are aligned, and I can't wait to see what these two can build together because it's going to be awesome in the very traditional sense of the word.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah, they're a good team.
Um, and then yeah, then we cut to the part of the sales pitch, which is to the rest of the council. And I just really wanted to bring up the part where like Verona is making her pitch, and on one of the cues, Lucy turns some music on to complement the sales pitch.
Mm.
And it was a very like, don't tell Lucy I said this, but that was the most like kids in middle school doing a PowerPoint for class vibe ever. That like they've rehearsed this enough that Lucy's putting on like background music for parts of the pitch.
Yeah, it's very silly, isn't it?
like, like, I'm sure it worked or whatever, but I was just like, God, that's the most like 13 the Kenneteers have felt in years.
Yeah, I guess it's the theatrics of it that helps sell it in this universe, but yeah,
It is, but
still.
that's such a middle school presentation aesthetics.
um, let's talk about the market as a way to help keep Kenneth safe, though. Like it, the way Matthew describes it in this chapter of it will make them more interesting, too interesting to fail? Question mark. Like I don't know. It's I guess it kind of conceptually makes some sense, but I also worry the more we've seen practitioners, witch hunters, whatever, take interest in Kenneth, the worse it's been. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah, I think the concerns that people like Miss and Rourke raise here are absolutely valid because
Yeah.
there has been a direct correlation between how much attention Kenneth gets and how much it gets absolutely blasted by bullshit. Um,
Yeah.
but
But yeah, I
like I
mean, that
mean,
ship has sailed, right? I guess is the
yeah,
main point.
that is the argument. And I also think, like, in terms of the whole too interesting to fail status, I think the majority of people in the area in the story right now would label Kenneth's current status as about to fail. Like, most people don't believe in this place, and it's been on the like everyone's been telling them that it's not going to work the whole story. So, like, the pivot to a lot of people seemingly thinking, "Oh, this is interesting. Let's keep it around to see what happens." That's a huge improvement over their current status of everyone thinking they're doomed. So,
Mm,
it's progress.
yeah. Yeah. um, I guess you're right. It is progress, I suppose. So that's good.
And I mean, yeah, it's one of those things where there's going to be at some point a threshold that they cross where it becomes true. Like I think that they're right that if they can become this economic center, they will become kind of untouchable because they'll be too important to too many people. You won't want to fuck with them.
Mm,
But you're right, that road to getting there is the scary part because as you try to establish it, that's when other people notice and you're either competition or you're unnerving or whatever. Um, so you gotta like figure out how to go from everyone noticing you to everyone realizing you're too big to fuck with. Like that's the tricky part of the execution.
mm, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Um, also, that's the bit where we find out Liz was here the whole time, which just like
Yeah, just chilling in the corner.
it's so good because it happened, and like Verona just starts addressing Liz, and I was like, "What the fuck, Liz is here?" And I was like, "How did I miss that?" And it got to the point where I was so weirded out that I missed it that I actually like Control F the page and searched for all the things of Liz, and it was like that is the first mention of her. But I just like I couldn't believe like that was true. Like it's such a good. I think I saw somebody compare it to like the panning shot, like if it was a visual adaptation, you have careful camera work so the camera could just suddenly pan at this moment. You'd be like, "Oh fuck, Liz is here," because it's so good. Like it's really nice for Wildbow to let us in on this side of the curtain for once, where we get to be like, "Oh guys, why are you telling Liz all this? That's a fucking disaster. She's going to use it against you."
Yeah. Uh, I am very excited for the moment where they realize Liz is behind all this shit that's been fucking with them because like she's being so horrible to them and they're trying to be so nice to her.
Yeah, I mean, this is the funny thing. Like 18.y was basically Liz just moaning the whole time because people don't include her, and then they're like, "Hey, you want to be included?" And she's like, "No, fuck off,
Yeah.
not like this."
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, but it's so funny because we're there, and it's like you're hearing all about the night markets, and you're like, "Oh, if Liz knows this is meant to be a trap for the St. Victor's practitioner, then it's probably not going to work." And then we find out Liz is fucking standing right there, and it's like, okay, well, that's interesting. That's a thorn in our side, I guess.
Mm, yeah. Yeah, we'll have to see how it goes, I suppose.
Yeah. Um, Also, there's that great moment when people are talking about like the safety and security of the market. Um, Avery pipes in. It's one of the few lines Avery has, but she pipes in to say, "I don't think there's ever an endpoint where we're secure, where we don't have to travel a tricky and carefully guarded road to get there." And I was like, "Oh, so somebody has been thinking about what Samaniego told her."
Yeah, good, as she should.
Yeah. Well, it seems like she's taking the much better message of of his like his version of the message, which is she's like, we
Yes.
should always be somewhat wary, but like, you know, Avery's then not going to take the next step that he takes, which is so nobody should ever be
Yeah.
happy.
Some murder all practitioners. um, but yeah, we jump ahead to seeing the market actually happening, and Alpi has a great time participating, and we see a woman get a new heart from the old bodies and a cool new pen.
Yeah, I just loved how Alpi like it's just so funny that they like had to really talk Alpi into doing this, and then she tries it. And she's like, "Oh my god, this is great!" Like it was just such a hilarious and cute moment. Um, and mind you, Verona keeps thinking, "Oh, Alpi's having so much fun." Like she's not doing the same shit. Like there's that moment where somebody's going a bit off course, so Verona like chucks her cat mask on and starts like signing for her to go ways, and then like disappears in a literal shadow that she made. And it's just
Mm.
like, oh, Verona, you're fucking loving this. Like, like Verona is absolutely having a ball.
Yeah. Um, it is fun though, so
Yeah,
you
you
can
would be.
totally, yeah.
I'm not judging her for it. It's just funny that like Verona keeps thinking to herself, "Oh, look how much fun Alpi's having," as she's doing the exact same thing. Like she doesn't even seem to realize how much of a good time she's having as part of this.
Yeah. Um, we get some more old bodies here, which is worrying. They're very terrifying, and it's especially rough because it seems pretty clear that the BSW is going to split from Kennet before too long, which means uh, the old bodies are going to become more and more important. But they feel
Yeah,
very untrustworthy. Yeah, like they feel similar to me, like Rook or Turtle Queen, or like they're potentially very dangerous and kind of only barely staying on side, which means we're kind of ship of thesising ourselves into a not very trustworthy Kennet Council again.
yeah, they wouldn't be my first picks for the like Biddy's replacement.
But it sounds
Um,
like they
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 are.
they are exactly right.
I like this is the thing. She's had fucking ages because like this has been something that the council's been talking to her about since like when Arc 15. It's been like you've got to figure out who your replacement is if you want to leave or whatever. And apparently this is the best she could do. Like
Mm,
come on, like put Toad Swallow there.
yeah, no, I think she could do better, but I don't
Um,
know.
yeah, I mean, yeah, the old bodies are interesting because they're not like evil, but they're not like as you said, it's a bit like the Turtle Queen, where it feels like you're going to constantly be having to sort of like fight them a bit and nudge them. Like they're not. It's just going to be a lot of effort, if even if they are kind of on side.
Mm,
Like everything with the Turtle Queen, you just have to like eke it out of her, and it feels like it'd kind of be the same with the old bodies.
mm, yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't like them. They suspicious.
Yeah, I'm not willing to write them off, but it's certainly like a group that if they took charge, there'd be like a probationary period at least where I'd want like most of what they do pretty closely looked at.
Mm,
Same as the Turtle Queen, really.
yeah. Um, yeah. So this chapter ends with Verona heading to St. Victor's to scope it out and find some dodgy kids doing dirty deeds. She interrupts them, but doesn't get much info on them, unfortunately, besides the fact that they're necromantic and technomantic and there's dangerous things going on.
Yeah, and that they stayed at school overnight, which is a real villain
Mm,
move.
hmm. Yeah. I mean,
Um,
yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
they're monsters.
um, yeah, I mean this is interesting because like I we don't know I don't know enough about necromancy to know what they were trying to do with this corpse or whose corpse it even was. Um, but like it definitely made me think of the mummy, um, just because it was wrapped in bandages. A part of me is
Right, of
thinking like
course.
it is part of what's happening here that like obviously I'm sure Charles, Liz, and Marcy are like intentionally teaching these students specific things, but I'm thinking between like maybe a mummy and Father Grobar as part of their remit just to do cool shit that they like. Like we've got from like a video game thing to maybe if someone was making a mummy that feels like very movie inspired, like are they just making weird shit that they're into? And what does that mean?
Mm, yeah.
And then what's next?
Yeah. I don't know.
Like if we have the video game one, the horror movie one, sports movie. Well, we haven't had an Avery-esque one, so we get the sports movie. We'll get the goose from that Goose movie, the one that breaks its neck.
Yeah, that would be
That's
fun.
next.
Yeah, no, I don't know. You're right. They giving kids magic is a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a bit last week. Like, I went through my big list of fun ways I think they can parallel the Kenneteers, and like this is one of them. Is the like if they come across as just like having an absurd amount of power, and they kind of out Kenneteer the Kenneteers in that whole like wild practitioners with just an absolute fuckload of power.
Mm,
I think that's really fun, and that would sort of certainly sell that idea that there's like yeah, part of their remit is just, hey, build a cool other from a video game that you like.
yeah. Yeah.
It does feel like the Kennedys are getting close to figuring out who is behind this because like Verona essentially rules out that any other practitioners are involved.
Mm,
Because there are apparently no. But they specify that there's no alive necromancers, which I was like, with necromancers feels like a qualifier that you need to double check.
yep, fair enough.
But like there's no real active necromancers or known technomancers who could have been doing this, so they're clearly getting their info from somewhere else, and it's like surely not going to take them long to figure out that means it's Charles and Co. Um,
Mm,
but yeah, so that's going to be fun. Like it feels like we're heading into the back half of this arc, and we've got to juggle the Negateers, the Wild Hunt, and Nora's coming to visit.
yeah, lots of dangerous stuff coming to town.
Yeah, it should be fun.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, this is where these chapters end with a lot of dangerous things being set up for the next three chapters. So I look forward to the chaos of that, I suppose.
Yeah, it. I'm very excited for this arc. I think, at the risk of making a statement that has been proven wrong time and time again, I feel like we're on a trajectory towards the end of the story, and part of that is because it feels like fighting the Negateers is going to be the thing that kind of puts Kennet directly across from the culprits again.
Mm,
And so I'm
yeah,
just so excited to see that unfurl. Like the moment where they realize it's Liz and Charles and stuff who are supporting them, and then how they deal with that is just gonna like that's such an escalation in relations between these two groups.
yeah. It really does feel like there's going to be a big fight again. So
Yeah,
that's worrying.
I think it's still a fair bit away, but it's like that's the direction we're heading in again.
Yeah.
So somebody else brought up the thing that I missed is Verona's mum's also coming to visit. So not just Nora, but Verona's
Yes.
mum at some point. There's
Yeah.
so much to do.
Lots of stuff to do. Lots going on. But we'll have to find out about that next week, Elliot, because that's the end of our episode for this week. As a reminder, before we go, we are running a discussion question, which is which video game character would you summon as an other? I've been seeing the notifications for some of these answers coming in, and I'm very excited to talk about them next week. So if you have a video game character that you want to have as your familiar or best friend or lieutenant, then you can leave your answer to that in our discussion thread, which is linked in the show notes down below.
Yeah, don't forget to drop some predictions and Pale Predictor too.
Mm.
Everyone, we there's a lot of shit about to happen in this story, so give us your hot takes. And also don't forget to stop by our Twitter. I mean, Ruben, do you want to gainsay yourself and say the thing about the memes again, or do
Yeah,
you want me
we
to do it?
post memes every single day on our Twitter, so you
Cool.
can check it out there at Power Reflectcast. A new meme every day, a new power related meme. So enjoy.
um, and yeah, don't forget to stop by our website too, doofmedia.com. That's where you can found out about all the other good shows on the Doof Media Network, like Pale in Comparison, which had a
Mm.
very fun special guest on the show this week.
Yeah, yeah. If you want to support all the shows on the Duff Media Network, like Pale in Comparison, you can go to patreon.com/Duff Media. You get access to all kinds of pieces of bonus content, including maybe the funnest podcast recording that we've ever done, Elliot, which is just released this week.
Yeah, true.
Absolutely delightful episode of our bonus show, The High Ground, which was very fun. It
It's
is
the most the two of us have ever disagreed on a thing in a podcast, I think,
Yeah.
by a significant margin.
Yeah. And I'm used to being the one who is
Yeah,
down on things. It was very strange reversal
yeah.
for me to be like, no, this thing that you think is terrible is actually really good.
I think that's what was. Yeah, it was the biggest disagreement we've had, and we were probably playing the roles we don't usually play as a part of that too. So it was a very
Yeah,
fun change of pace.
very interesting. Yes. Anyway, if you want to find out more about that, you can become a patron at patreon.com/duffmedia.
Yeah, and finally, don't forget to stop by Wildbow's Patreon. Patreon.com/Wildbow. If you do it, he'll teach you necromancy and you get to stay at school and drink soda.
Yep. So sounds fun. So become a patron. And hey, thanks for joining us, folks. It's great to see you, both the live folks and the later listeners. Hope you're having a good week and catch you around.
See ya.